Well, tonight is spaghetti and meatball night at my household, and I've been charged with making a delicious meal. As I'm chopping away here, you'll see that I'm generating some little pieces of waste and such that, will make my sauce a whole lot better if it's not in there. Speaking of waste, did you know that up to 50% of the waste that you and I produce in a household is organic waste, like food scraps, but also leaf and yard waste? And did you know that through backyard composting, we can effectively manage that part of the waste stream and make a great product? So I'm going to show you a little bit about what I do in my household, and I'm going to take my scraps here actually now, and I'm going to put them in my little trusty little pail that I have here, just for such waste. And I'm going to take this, and I would like it if you could join me, come out to my backyard and take a look at my backyard composter and see how I'm able to manage some of the waste that I generate in my household. The composting process is fairly straightforward. It's a microbial process undertaken by bacteria and fungi that are naturally occurring, and really all we're doing is we're going to help stimulate some of those bacteria and fungi. Now, for some of you, backyard composting is old hat and you've been doing it for many years. For some of you, it's new, and let me spend a few minutes and show you a little bit about backyard composting and how it works. Backyard composting isn't terribly difficult. It's actually fairly easy. It's a little bit of maintenance, not quite like a self-cleaning oven, but certainly with a little bit of maintenance, you're going to be able to compost quite well very quickly. As well, I mean, there's lots of different kinds of composters out there, and there's nothing terribly magical about those different types of composters. You know, you can buy them at hardware stores, or you can buy them sometimes from municipalities for a low price. Irregardless, what it does at the end of the day, it functions as a container, and it helps you contain the organic waste that you're going to be putting in there. So let me show you what it is that I do in my backyard composter. You know, there's a few very simple steps to kind of get started. You want to have your composter in a well-drained area. You want to make sure that it's in a bit of sun and a bit of shade, not too much of either. And then, you know, you want to start thinking about what is it that the microorganisms are going to need to grow, the bacteria and the fungi that we have in there. Well, they're going to need two kinds of waste. They're going to need some green waste, like the waste that I have here. I'm going to pour in here. Those types of waste are full of nitrogen and full of other nutrients, and that's why they're so good for us. I mean, because they're full of nutrients, and so the bacteria and the fungi like to have those. But like anyone else, we need to have a balanced diet. So the other type of waste that we look at are browns. You know, the greens are like the food waste and such. The browns then are fairly obvious. Some of these leaf and yard waste. And one of the things that I do every fall is I keep some of these leaf and yard waste behind because during the summertime I don't have a lot of that, and I want to be able to mix that in there. So I'm going to mix my two waste streams in there. I'm going to keep doing that fairly regularly. The greens tend to be fairly wet. The browns tend to be a bit drier, so there's a good balance of moisture there. From time to time, I'm going to have dry feedstocks and very dry waste in there, so I'm going to want to add a little bit of water. Again, you know, you want your composter to have the sort of feeling of a dry, wrung-out sponge. I mean, if it's sopping wet in there, you don't need to be adding any water, but if it's a bit dry, you can just take your trusty watering bucket here and you can add some water. The real critical thing about backyard composting and composting in general is that microorganisms require oxygen, just like you and I. And how do we supply them with oxygen? Well, we actually take our trusty little pitchfork here or some other kind of turning device, and we go in here and we give the compost a turn. And we do that every once in a while to kind of, you know, stimulate the process and help break down some of the particles that are in there, and to generally help the composting process. And composting is one of those things, you know, that if you're in there doing this all the time, turning very regularly, then we have a composting process that moves very fast. If we do it once in a while, we're not that excited about backyard composting, but we still want to do it, well, then it just goes a little bit slower. And that's the nice thing about the composting process. It's very robust, meaning that if you don't pay that much attention to it, it's still going to operate okay. If you pay a bit more attention to it, then it's just going to go that much faster. And so what we're going to have here is, depending on how much effort you put into things, you're going to 6 months or 12 months, you know, more likely about a year, you're going to have a nice compost product that you're going to be able to put into your garden. And so I'm able to produce a nice quality product here that I can now put in my garden. And remember, this started off as my food scraps and my leaf and yard waste. And so now I'm able to put this into my garden, and you can see the veritable jungle that I have here that I've been able to grow this year. And when I'm applying compost, I'm going to mix in a small portion of compost and mix it in with the soil, and some of the nutrients and such that are left in the compost and the organic matter are going to be very good for the health of the soil. And you can see my own little garden. So it becomes a very satisfying exercise, taking this wet, juicy waste and trotting it out to the backyard all through the year, it really does give you a nice reward at the end of the day. So if you want to learn a little bit more about backyard composting, why don't you download our How to Backyard Composting Guide, available on our webpage, for free I might add, at www.thethinkgreenshow.com.